Morning, Mr. Manager. What you got for us?
We have three things today, Chairman and Commission. We're going to have a presentation by Elora, and I think Dr. Gallagher's coming too, regarding PulsePoint. And then we're going to spend some time talking about legislative agenda again today, and we're going to kind of focus on mental health and corrections today. And then if we have time, depending on how long that goes, we would have an agenda review for the meeting for next Wednesday, a week from tomorrow. So with that, Elora.
Morning, Laura.
Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners. Elora Forshee, your Director of 911. I have a bit of technical issues this morning with my PowerPoint. It's not going to play a nice presentation, but we're adaptable in Sedgwick County, so we're going to keep moving forward and not worry about that, and you'll get the gist of it. I do want to introduce real quick Shonda Rakestraw. If you'll stand up, Shonda. She is with Via Christi, or Ascension Via Christi. They are a partner organization in this, and I will ask her before it's all said and done to come up and say a few words about their partnership in this endeavor. But I want to introduce you to PulsePoint, which is an opportunity that we are being presented with for Sedgwick County that I think will serve our medical system, our emergency services system, and our citizens very beautifully. I'm going to play a quick video just to introduce you to PulsePoint and show you how it works before we get into the nitty-gritty of how it can work here in Sedgwick County. And it's a short video, but I think it really drives home the point of what it brings to us.
All of a sudden, 6-week-old Noah is not breathing. He's not breathing.
What's the location of your emergency?
131 South Sherman.
I remember that call coming out. Station 1's out of area. It's going to be at least 8 to 10 minutes before we get a resource there.
I was working in my shop. My cell phone made a noise that I hadn't really heard before.
Things were dire.
We have an infant who's not breathing.
The PulsePoint app resides as a part of your smartphone. It sends an alert that there's a cardiac arrest in your nearby area. Do you want to respond? When the need arises, that's your chance to truly be a hero and save somebody's life.
Pulled the phone out of my pocket and looked, and it said CPR needed, and it was a block and a half away.
I saw my child there limp and blue.
Are they awake at all?
No.
I remember screaming, "Help me," somehow, and I was helpless to help him.
Is today the last day that he'll be alive?
I just saw him come running in. He got there somehow. He found out about it. I didn't know how at that point.
And I picked him up and started doing some nose and mouth breathing for him. You could see the look in his eyes. He was like, help me, help me. Just wanted him to start breathing. The ambulance got there. And as soon as I handed him off to the paramedic, the baby started crying. And we both looked at each other and went, oh, that's a good sign.
The PulsePoint app really allows us to leverage the benefit of the people in the community that want to be a part of the solution. He was the closest resource.
Everybody should look up to Jeff. He is a hero. He's a miracle. If he didn't have that app, Nolan might not be here.
Nolan's 3 years old. He's all that's good and none that isn't. A phone saved my son's life.
He's overcome so much in his little life. I mean, he's fought to be here. We call him the little warrior.
So PulsePoint is a notification system to CPR-trained people in our community who volunteer to be a part of this, letting them know that there is a cardiac arrest event occurring in a public space, that they can go and provide early intervention to start providing that care to that patient. It leverages that ability for early intervention to create some life-saving ability in that cardiac arrest event that really creates a domino effect down the line of health benefits for that patient. Really, that provides some life-saving opportunity that isn't there without that early intervention. Additionally, PulsePoint provides an AED registry, which is something that we are in need of in our community. One of the statistics that I found kind of staggering within our community is that public use of AED is 5.9%, and that's a really low number. And that's that shock that I can't even think of what AED stands for. Gallagher, can you help me out with this, Doctor? Thank you very much. I was drawing a blank on it. But there are a lot of public spaces that have those now. But if I'm at the store and I don't know that they have that or where that is, it's not going to do me any good if I'm there with somebody who's in a cardiac arrest event. We log those AEDs in CAD when they are provided to us so that we can tell people on the phone, hey, there's an AED here. Here's where it is. Go find it. But in our entire community, we only have 64 of those currently logged into our CAD system. I know that there are hundreds more out there. So that's another benefit that this PulsePoint application provides for us, is that AED registry. Looking at nationally, PulsePoint's becoming a really trending service within many communities. If you do just a Google search on it, there are tons of news articles about them introducing it in communities. I've attached two to your packet of information that really highlight some communities that are leveraging this to provide great benefits to their first responders, to their citizens, to make sure that people are getting that early intervention as quickly as possible. For PulsePoint, they have around 92,965 activations to date. They give 24-hour statistics on their website, so I pulled it up this morning to get the latest. There's 96 in the last 24 hours, 519 responders notified, 3,716 connected communities, over 1 million, almost 2 million app users, and over 87,000 AEDs registered. So those numbers are pretty impressive for what they're doing for these communities that have them. So Via Christi approached Dr. Gallagher, who then, brought me into the picture because it really ties into the 911 system, wanting to know what we could do to bring this to the community because they see where this early intervention is so critical to the long-term care of the patient, to the survival rate of a patient. They have agreed and have offered, I guess, to come forward in a partnership, and that's what they are bringing to us as an opportunity to partner in this. In the partnership, what they are providing is $209,000 over 3 years. It's broken out there in year 1, 2, and 3 what they would provide. There is a fee for the CAD integration, so this would integrate into our current CAD system. When we have these cardiac arrest events that are in public spaces, then it would activate this PulsePoint application, and then any first responder who is signed up to that, or not first responder, excuse me, a citizen who is CPR certified who is signed up for this would be notified that this is a cardiac arrest event in a public space so that they may respond. So they would be paying for that CAD integration via Christie's Foundation would. They would also pay for the PulsePoint implementation and this annual subscription fee. And then they are really coming in heavy with a marketing campaign to help push this out and promote this in our community. It was really incumbent on that to get those AEDs registered, to get those people signed up for it, to get that awareness out there so that it's successful as it moves forward. Year 2, of course, they're paying the subscription fee and more towards the marketing campaign, and that continues in year 3. What's not figured in that $209,000 is up to $15,000 that they have agreed to pay for a future CAD integration if needed. We all know we're moving towards a new CAD system. And so when we do bring that online, if there is a fee associated with integrating with whoever our new CAD vendor is, they will pay up to $15,000 of that. And looking at the vendors that we have received proposals from, I believe that should cover, if not come very close to covering any fee for integration. What we are going to bring to the table, should we decide to move forward to this, is that we would work for that CAD integration, of course, between Northrop Grumman and PulsePoint, and we would allow for those notifications to be made. We would partner in this PR campaign with Via Christi, allowing Sedgwick County to be used on all marketing mentions and materials as a sponsor of this, and participating in media interviews and public service announcements. And then there's another layer to this PulsePoint campaign that's for verified first responders. So our EMS fire personnel that we know are accredited through Dr. Gallagher's office, that we know are true first responders, they would have an additional layer within the system where they could respond into private residences or businesses that are not public spaces if there is a cardiac arrest event occurring. So if 2 blocks over somebody's having a cardiac arrest event and there's an off-duty firefighter at home that can respond over and provide that early intervention, then they would be notified of such. When you get that alert on your phone, you're not required to respond. There's nothing that holds you to that. So they are not on duty all the time by any means. It's voluntary, and they would, of course, volunteer at that point to provide that service. So that's a high-level overview of it. We do have currently, I've put forth to legal the agreement between Via Christi and ourselves on those points that we have discussed here. There is an agreement between PulsePoint, Via Christi, and Sedgwick County on how the statement of work would all come together, on how that work would go down and what that would look like. And so we're running that through legal to make sure that we are all covered and protected in that. And so that's still under review, but we wanted to at least see if there was a taste for this in our community, see what your thoughts were, and if we want to go ahead and continue moving forward to see if we can bring this to life.
Very good. Well, thank you. One quick question. Is there any liability that any of these people that respond would have, that maybe that liability might be transferred back to Sedgwick County somehow?
We did talk to PulsePoint about that, and they have said that their legal opinion under their legal department is that the Good Samaritan laws cover those legal liabilities. And that's something that we would, of course, want to flesh out through our legal department as well to make sure that we have examined that very thoroughly. But they have not had any incidents, anything that have come up within all the use within these other systems where they have seen the liability come to fruition that they, have not already looked at to see that current laws have provided for.
Okay, thank you. Questions from the commissioners?
And I'm so sorry. I did want to invite Shonda Rakestraw up here if you'll stand with me for any questions that they may have for both of us. Sorry, Commissioner, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So you said you had 64 AEDs logged into your system. So there's a way to register those now?
We do have an ability within our system to flag addresses per se. And so, yes, we can create those flags in there now. It's not anything like if I were, if I were out there in the public, I would not have it on the app on the screen the way that it would be presented within PulsePoint, but there is a way to do it now, yes.
And in PulsePoint, it gives you pictures of where that AED is located inside those facilities, as well as step-by-step directions of how to locate it within the facility itself, not just that it's at this address, but go in the front door to the right. It's very detailed.
Have we talked with any of the AED providers to find out if they're willing to promote registration with their clients? Because I know there's a number of companies that service and sell and maintain those devices, and so it wouldn't be very many providers necessarily. We'd probably capture a whole lot more if we had that conversation with them. Would we try to do that?
We do. The AEDs that we have that are in our system now are provided by the AED sellers or distributors that give us that notification. But that's as far as we've gotten. Like I said, is the 64 in there. That's part of where this PulsePoint initiative comes in. If we were to go in this direction, is that marketing campaign and some efforts being driven more towards that have not happened thus far.
Continuing on, you have some good numbers here for registration, but do you have any numbers on actual users of the system? In other words, how many times have you contacted someone that's provided a service? I mean, you give us a nice video about one, but what's the stats on that type of?
Well, so on that second slide, the 519 responders notified in the last 24 hours. Of that, I don't have anything more finite of how many of those actually went to the patient. Is that what you were looking for?
Okay, I guess I didn't understand what that meant. So 519 responders were notified in the last 24 hours.
Of the 96 CPR activations. And of those, there were 627 AEDs identified during that time. So the idea is that you have it set up to where at least about 4 people are notified of each event is what we've tried to get. And so you set up the parameters of it's about a quarter-mile radius of whoever's within a quarter mile of that location of where that event occurs would get the notification. And if we see some certain areas of town that maybe we don't have that, we may need to expand it to a half a mile radius type of thing. So it's got a lot of good data that we'll be able to pull from the website.
Who actually activates the notification to the registered providers? I mean, is that something 911 dispatch does, or how does that work?
It is done through the background in CAD. With the addresses that are public addresses identified as public spaces would trigger an alert in the background based on the call type and the location that would then go through PulsePoint to the app users.
Does it So it doesn't require someone at the 911 operator's desk to.
It is not a manual.
It happens manual.
Right.
It
It
happens
is not.
automatically.
Yes. Yes.
This would also, I mean, do we know how much time this saves in terms of if these 519 responded? What's the average? I mean, we got to get some more data about that. But how much time is saved between our ambulances are pretty quick, especially in the city. How much time is shaved off? Because if I don't know the building, I got to go to. I have to run down the street, find a building, go inside, get in, find the AED. I'm saying there's a lot of time there to do all those things. I'm just curious that compared to an EMS. Do we have any data to talk about? How much time is shaved off on average, or the success of this program? I mean.
Well, a lot of it's going to rely on the person who's gotten the notification to then go in and finish their notification and say, yes, they did respond to the event and the timestamp and stuff. So that'd be a little bit harder to track, I imagine. But it would still be analytics that we'd have to pull out. But I don't have any of that data for other communities right now. I'm sure we could try and gather some.
And then finally, I'd like to see that data. And then finally, for this to work, the providers would have to be willing to opt in, I suppose, to be tracked by the system. They'd have to be able to know where these people are and see if they're in the vicinity of the event that's going on. So somehow you've got to be able to know where people are.
You're signed in to the app, and it's just working off of GPS, basically. So you're signed in anonymously. They don't know who you are, so if you don't go, nobody knows that you didn't go. If you responded, they don't necessarily know that you responded either unless you fill out the notification that you receive after the event is completed. And that's completely voluntary. But it works off of GPS, and whoever's in that certain radius that we determine, whether it be half a mile, quarter mile, whatever it is, those people in that radius with the PulsePoint app activated are going to get the alerts to their phone.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you. I'm excited about this. I think this is fantastic. Love the video. It almost brought me to tears, actually. And I went through the numbers here, and the foundation will be paying for everything, it looks like. And there's no financial commitment necessary from Sedgwick County, either currently or in the future. There won't be.
There is one small financial commitment that would be in the CAD maintenance. It's around $1,500 a year annually for that, which we have the budget to absorb that. But yes, so for 3 years, we would pretty much have this as a gift to our community, and from there, we would need to decide as a county if we wanted to move forward with funding it ourselves.
Okay, so the foundation's offering it for 3 years.
For 3 years, and then reevaluate at that point. We're moving forward.
Okay, so we think that cost would be the $1,500 for the CAD, and then $18,000 a year
For
is
the
the
annual
current
membership.
subscription. So that's what we would need to evaluate after the first 3 years. Is that $18,000?
Yes, and that's for our current CAD system, is that $1,500 maintenance fee. I don't know on the next CAD system that there will be such a fee or what that would be. I don't believe that that's typical in a CAD system to have a maintenance fee.
That currently
that
what
amount.
we're looking at
Yes,
is a
currently.
negligible
Yes.
amount of money.
Yes.
But this will also allow us to have the data like Commissioner House.
Absolutely,
looking for
yeah,
to
we
know
would
if
have-
This is something worthwhile or not.
Yeah, we would have
But-
3 years of statistics.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's tremendous. So thank you, Mrs. Rakestraw, and Alora, as always, you knock it out of the park.
Thank you.
Commissioner Meissner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Laura, thanks for the presentation. Is this something that Dr. Gallagher and when we were the early discussions with the ICT-1 world, and we talked about Tulsa, had this similar?
Yes, this was one of those things that we talked about in those early discussions of how to make the most of our
Right.
system, yes.
Well, my compliments that you've evolved that into this document. But I think when we're having those discussions, it was more than just heart attacks and stuff. It was kind of any emergencies. Is that, or
I can't do that.
I'm thinking back to those discussions. I don't know of any other app or service that provides for anything beyond cardiac arrest events.
okay?
Dr. Gallagher, can you speak to
I don't know.
those discussions?
No, somebody. Yeah, I remember heart attack was something that was talked about a lot. But if somebody had the grandma falls down in the bathtub, maybe hit her head,
Right.
don't know what's going on, don't know if it's code,
Right.
whatever color,
Right.
and so
Right.
still I thought there was contact being made.
I do remember those discussions. I don't remember that piece of it, but
Okay.
and I would let the medical professionals speak to it
Sure.
more intelligently. But I think that it's really on the cardiac arrest piece where that early intervention is so critical.
Yeah.
Where on other medical events, perhaps that's not as needed as a component.
So, and I assume that we don't have to bid this out since you're bringing us a service. Is there competitors to this group, to PulsePoint, or do you know?
I haven't. The reason we started down this path is that Ascension Via Christi in Indianapolis is launched it in two of their
Okay.
communities there, and so we saw that the success that it had in that community in Indianapolis, and that's why we brought it here to Wichita. We worked with the EMS director there at that location and the hospital, and so we really didn't move outside of PulsePoint just because of everything that it already has to offer.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what other competitors perhaps, but.
For Sedgwick County procurement, though, we are not spending but the $1,500 in the CAD maintenance. And so, Lindsay, would you agree
is it
that
15,000 or 1,500?
1,500 in the CAD maintenance? Yes, 1,500.
And I assume Northrop Grumman is probably integrated with PulsePoint many times.
They have,
So
yes.
That probably is not a big challenge, I wouldn't think.
I would hope not. It's a trickier CAD vendor to work with at times, which is why we are moving towards a new one. But I know that of the preferred CAD vendors that PulsePoint lists to work with, that the ones that we are looking at as potential new CAD vendors are on there. So I think we are absolutely going to make it successful with Northrop Grumman. I think transitioning to the new CAD system was going to be pretty seamless, and we're going to make it successful
Right.
both ways.
Thank you. I'm glad that we've taken this step, so my compliments.
Well, I appreciate Via Christi
Thank
being
you,
a willing
Via
partner in
Christi.
it.
And with the 3,700 communities, that's constantly growing, but 3,700 communities across the United States that currently have PulsePoint. So
Right.
if you were signed into PulsePoint and you're traveling and you're in another community that has it, you're going to get those alerts as well, and vice versa. If somebody's coming and visiting our community and maybe they're in the right place at the right time. I mean,
One a small thing, but we've all been, those of us that go to church once in a while, we've always been in a church where there's been an incident where a person has collapsed.
Yeah.
Nobody really knows what that is, and usually then the ushers are hit 911. So you say public places, would that include
churches,
Absolutely.
churches? And,
places that would be like your nursing homes, hospitals, correctional facilities, and then private residents. But otherwise, yeah, churches would definitely be included.
okay, thanks.
Commissioner Cruz.
Thank you. So how do they have to register yearly with their certification, or how frequently do you update people who have CPR certifications?
And we're not necessarily tracking their CPR certification. You're going off of just kind of a goodwill. But at the same time, if you get a hold of an AED and you hook up an AED, it talks you through it.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily have to be CPR certified to be able to use an AED. It would be ideal. And we have, I don't remember how many people that are CPR certified that don't ever get a chance to really use it. So you don't have to have the certification in order to sign up and use it. You just have to be willing to step in and help in a situation. We're kind of looking at some opportunities to provide CPR training to the community once we kind of have this nailed down some more, and use opportunity to bring some more training into the community. Hands-on CPR is more of the American Heart Association has gone to in the last few years for community people, so it makes things a lot more something people will more likely step into if they know that they're just having to do hands and not mouth-to-mouth type thing. So we're looking for opportunities to be able to go out and train in the community and increase those numbers of people who are CPR certified. But we're not going to be able to do that on the app necessarily.
Okay.
If I may, I'm so sorry, if I may add to this, this is an enhancement to the 911 call also, not a replacement. So we are still going to be providing those CPR instructions and that guidance over the phone. And so what happens is sometimes you have been CPR trained, but you've never been really hands-on with the patient. And so that's great that you have that training, but when you get there, you freeze. And so we're still going to be leading them through that. The other part is that I'm CPR trained and certified, but when it's my child, my mother, my son, it's not the same. And so getting that stranger or that bystander in there, sometimes, even if they are not trained, remember it, whatever, getting that third party in there, even to get those instructions over the phone, sometimes provide some distance there that can provide some hands-on care that I may be too frozen up to do.
No, I'm excited about the program. I just wondered, since in the video it kind of mentioned about CPR and it didn't really mention the other device. So, but the other, do we partner with the American Heart Association? Do we partner with anybody else to provide that in the community? Do we know?
CPR training or?
CPR training. Do we do that as a health department?
Fire?
It's super expensive, he says.
We do lots of CPR training. We do not do it through American Heart Association due to the cost.
So as Sedgwick County, we do that just for our employees or for the public in general?
It's a mix.
So the $25,000 that you guys are going to do for a marketing campaign, or is that just public awareness, or will you be offering anything like that?
We haven't finalized what the marketing would be. I think initially the first years would be $75,000, but it's media, billboards, web, all of that. But I don't think that's going to include the rest. I think there's enough of us trained that teach CPR that it's not really going to be an expense for me to go in and volunteer my time to teach a community, a group. I've done it at churches. I've done it for the law enforcement officers. It's my time. I'm volunteering to go in and do it, so it's not really a cost to my organization to really.
Well, just getting people in the same room and letting them know about it, that's kind of expensive. No, I'm excited. Thank you for the presentation.
Very good. Do we have an AED in this building?
We do.
I was going to say, I don't know.
I think we have a couple in this building.
Where at?
We have a couple in this building.
Who knows where it is?
Yeah. Does anybody know where they're at?
I know we have one on the first floor, and I think we have a couple on the other floors, but I don't know exactly where they're at on the other floors.
Yeah. We probably ought to figure out where they're at. I didn't even know we had any, so.
There's one in the tunnel, right?
Yes, there is one in the tunnel.
Oh, I do them.
I remember that one.
There is one in the tunnel, I agree.
For all three people that walk past it.
Thank
Very
you so
good.
much for
Well,
the opportunity.
Laura, thank you very much. This is exciting. I look forward to, first of all, we want to thank Dear Christie for helping us with this, but I look forward to getting this implemented in our 911 system.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Mr. Papoon, you on?
I guess the mic's been turned over to me, so I will talk about our continuing evolution of the legislative platform. You're going to be getting a handout that was put together rather quickly, pretty much just amending the first handout you had a couple weeks ago, talked about in a staff meeting. I think the behavioral health issues are starting to coming in more focus, and I think, is Joan here today to discuss? Joan's here to discuss those, and then the other day when we got to the issues involving corrections, you had some questions there, and I think Glenda is here today to discuss some of those. But essentially, this document has been changed in terms of, if you go to the second page, wait a minute. If you go to basically the bottom of the first page, top of the second, ComCare, when we were discussing that, I narrowed down from last year's 7 issues down to 4, and these were sort of the issues that were discussed then in more general terms. Since then, Tim Kaufman has worked with me on narrowing these down, and I know he discussed it some last week, but the two issues that he thinks are the most highest priority are what's at the top of page 2, addressing the behavioral health needs of uninsured and underinsured by specifically supporting an $8.2 million request for increased funding to the CMHC system, including ComCare, and then strengthening and enhancing the Medicaid safety net through enhanced Medicaid rates for behavioral health by supporting a 4% increase for behavioral health reimbursement codes to address increased cost of service. And I think they're here today to talk about those two potential priority legislative matters and compare those, I guess, to the other issues. On last year, of course, we had a regionalized state mental health facility as one of the top priorities, and whether we want to de-emphasize that or keep that at the top should be probably part of the discussion as well. So I'll turn it over to Tim.
So you're saying that support for a regional mental health facility is not as important as these two items that Tim identified?
All three of them are critically important. It's just a matter of ordering and the likelihood that we'll get support from the legislature. And I think right now, the opportunity that we have is probably greater with that additional grant funding for the system and for the Medicaid rate enhancement. I think the hospital is also critically important. I just don't know that the price of those three different things in order, the hospital, regional hospital system is a much greater expense, and so I'm not convinced that there's as great an opportunity.
It's a greater expense, but we've got a behavioral health pod now within the jail. Have you run this by the sheriff? Because he's one of the big proponents of the regional mental health facility. And I certainly wouldn't want to undercut what the sheriff's priorities are.
I'm going to let Joan speak and see whether or not she's got a perspective on the sheriff's.
Yeah, we value having beds close to home, but I will say there's a lot of people fighting for that, including the legislature, and it was a recommendation from the Mental Health Task Force. So the efforts on how to apply that and start spreading resources across the state are already occurring. So for us, the two that are on there are key because that will keep our system whole here in Sedgwick County for the services we're delivering. If we don't get some increases, some of those services may not be able to be delivered in the way they are today.
Well, I truly believe that we need to make sure that ComCare is adequately funded and that we have the rates established for the providers. But one of the things I've been talking about, and as a result of working with the sheriff, is this regional mental health facility. When we went up to Topeka the last couple of years and had dinner with the legislators, that's one of the main topics we discussed. And it just kind of baffles me that we wouldn't still have that at the top.
If that's your preference, we can certainly leave it there. All three of them, as I mentioned, important. All three are important.
I don't know what the other commissioners think, but I guarantee you that when we're going up there and it's cold and snowy and we're arguing, not arguing, but we're negotiating with our legislators, one of the main things we talk about is regional mental health facility. And that's what the slides show when we go up there and talk at dinner. So I'd sure hate to start losing that emphasis.
Yeah, I think it's important, Chairman, to keep talking about it. I will just say that there's some momentum and some traction going on that issue. I think that's why for us it's a little lower priority. But it's still a priority. I mean, we have many, many priorities we push for.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Well, nothing. I just think that needs to be our long-term goal. I think that should be at the top of everything. Say, here's what we want, but we would live with this, and we would appreciate this, and kind of de-escalate instead of saying that it's lower. I think it needs to continually be our top number one priority for a long time. That's just my opinion on it. Because I think if we start knocking it down, then the legislators won't think it's as important to us.
Yeah, I just worry if it's our number one priority and that's the only thing they fund, there goes our workforce. Because you're going to still have to staff that, and even 15 beds is 100 workforce. So just remember, we've got competing priorities here.
Sure. Yeah. But even when we went up and talked to Senator Wagle, and we talked about the amount of overtime that's going into the state hospitals. I mean, we've had discussions up in Topeka about this, and if we don't continue pushing it, it's going to fall by the wayside.
I think what they're saying is we're not going to stop pushing for it. We are going to be pushing for it. I think, around Sedgwick County, that's what we want. We are going to be pushing for it, but I think when you talk about like everyday services that we're currently doing just to keep our lights on, right, just to keep us going, those kinds of things are important when it comes to facilitating services every day, tomorrow, the next day, next week. So we are. I would say that we are still pushing for that.
I'd
I mean, if
still
we
like
need
it listed as number one. And last year, Commissioner Meitzner can testify that every phone call that I made with our lobbyist up there, I said, how do we get ComCare funding to the point we need it, and to make sure that it's in the budget permanently rather than looking like it's an add-on. So I think that that's critical. We've got to keep it pushing forward, but these are all major issues, and if we don't keep talking about them, if we don't have them listed, then they're going to start falling by the wayside, because we're going to be emphasizing something that we haven't been emphasizing as much.
You had a lot of issues in that statement. They weren't all connected, but because the issue of sustaining us similar to Northeast Kansas is about crisis funding, and that's a whole different issue than the state hospital beds.
I understand that, but we talk about a lot of things when we're on the phone each week with our lobbyists trying to get things happening. We go up there to Topeka ourselves personally, and we talk to our legislators, and this is important. I don't know. I wouldn't support not listing that as number one, and listing the crisis center funding as two, and adding the 4% as number three.
Sorry, can you say that again? Because I think I missed
He just
one.
wants the number one to be a hospital, purported.
The regional hospital.
Yeah, you guys can put whatever you want for your public policy, yeah.
Any other comments?
And certainly we could, Mr. Chairman, we could still include for behavioral health ComCare issues in whatever order this commission wants to do it. We could still list the regional facility. We could have the two issues that have been drafted more specifically by Tim, and we could have still keep the crisis. I think we were told by our lobbyist a couple of weeks ago that he thought he had the crisis funding pretty much figured out. Doesn't mean we still can't put it on the platform to make sure that it's at the forefront of the legislators. So.
All right. What do you got next for?
The next part, and I apologize, these pages aren't numbered. Second to last page, I think, is the corrections issues. And Glenda had three issues there. Amending a statute to recapture some of the state gaming revenues, and then an increase in funding for community corrections adult resident centers, and increased funding for state-mandated community corrections adult intensive supervision programs. And I know that we wanted Glenda here to help explain these issues to you.
Good morning. Good morning, Commissioners. So I want to kind of walk through all three of them so you kind of understand where we're going. To amend KSA 494803, this was funding that was we got 20 plus years, and that money was for detention facilities. It was able to be used to sort of if they had to build something, fix something, food, medical, anything they wanted to use in the detention facilities. It was to sort of boost them to keep the detention facilities across the state funded. And then there was a change in 2016, and they took the funding that was diverted from gaming to detention facilities to alternatives to detention. And that kind of hurt us because we would get about $200,000 every year. It's based upon capacity, and we would use that money for food and medical costs. So my proposal is to ask them to revert back to the way it was intended, to give the detention facilities the funding so that they can use it on whatever funding issues they might have. And that's my proposal.
These are juvenile?
These are juvenile. This is juvenile detention facility. Number two is the increased funding for community corrections adult residential centers. And while the residential centers are not mandated programs, there's only two in the state.
One is our residential facility, and the other is Johnson County. That, again, has been the flat funding for 20 plus years. And we are asking that they increase that funding. There's a cost of living to doing business, and they just have not kept up with any increases. Our capacities have stayed very similar, but the costs have not increased. We help keep people out of prison. So people that are in community corrections, the last chance is to go to a residential facility. If they're successful, they don't go to prison. Even if they stay or they get revoked and go to prison, their time served in a residential facility gets counted for them. So either way, it saves the state money. And so I would like to go in and ask for more money from the state.
Glenda, I see the first part of that says exists only in Sedgwick and Johnson County.
Correct.
And of course, we always talk about Johnson County gets this and that, and
right.
we get this and that. So are you working closely in cooperative with Johnson County
yes.
to have this? Are we on the same page with Johnson County on this too?
They are doing, they know about this. They're doing some things differently. So for example, Robert Sullivan, who runs the Johnson County program, they are changing the way they do business, and they are taking intensive supervision officers out of the mix to lower their costs, because they just don't think they're making as big a headway or success rate with that. They also, their cost is $166, somewhere around there, approximately a day. Our cost is about $66 a day. So they're trying to lower some of their costs, increase their population, and do a lot less supervision. But Johnson County is, I think they could just almost not want or need the money.
Okay. So short answer is we're not really working in cooperative with them.
Well, to push this forward, I think they could.
So we're kind of on our own, which is
we're
fine.
kind of on our own.
And we're now we're the only county that would be pushing for this initiative.
Probably. I really don't know if Robert would be on board to help us push.
So can you give us just an example of like what our population is compared to their population
Sure.
and how it's increased or decreased over the last 20 years?
Well, it's based upon capacity, and our capacity is at 65. We keep about 67, 69 in and out, and that's our capacity. Johnson County's capacity is a lot bigger. Right now they're running about 180, 190 in their capacity. We receive almost 1.2 million from KDOC for our residential facility, and they get about almost 900,000. Now, their population isn't just KDOC clients. They get other clients that come into their residential facility.
I guess you'll have to help me understand that later, because it's like we get more money with less capacity and they get...
Their capacity, they're showing what their capacity is, but they're not all KDOC clients. So they're city clients. So their population is a little higher, but I can't pull out those people that are different.
One thing I just want to point out, though, is that, and when I was talking with our attorney, when I look at this, you're asking for something very specific. I mean, she's pointed out exactly what she'd like to have changed. And to me, when we just say support or, very sort of general type statements, it's kind of harder for them to like pinpoint. When we talk about gaming revenues and we talk about the Problem Gambling and Addictions Fund, I mean, $4 million was swept out of that into the Medicaid fund. So when you talk about sweeping money, is there a way to talk about keeping it in that fund? I mean, if Medicaid is funding us in a way, they're already funding us. Why would we not want that money to stay where it's at, to go to the gambling and addictions, instead of sweeping it into something else? So maybe I need to be better educated on this topic, but to me, it would we could ask for that specific funding to stay in the pot where it's supposed to be, kind of like what you're doing here.
Well, I think the money that comes for the residential facility comes straight out of KDOC's funding. And we just need to make them understand that their prison population is exploding to the point where they're sending their prison people to other states. And they don't have the capacity in the state to keep them. And we're doing everything that we can to work with those clients and keep them from going to prison. They should be willing to send some money back to us. So I think they recognize that. It's just that in order to keep sustaining a residential, I mean, it's supported because of the work release program, but had I not had the work release program, it would not be sustaining itself by itself. They're expensive programs. They're worthy because $66 a day to get services, supervision, to keep somebody out of prison, to help them find a job is definitely well worth our money.
Yeah, I'm 100% supportive of your platform. I was just trying to make a general statement about, how when we go back to our ComCare funding here, if there's already a funding stream there, why wouldn't we be more specific? You're saying you want a state hospital, right? Where does that money come from? Instead of, and I don't know that we could do it with the state hospital thing, but what I'm saying is, where does this money come from, and how could we keep it specifically in a fund? I'm looking at you back there.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a response for you. It would come for us. It would come from a KDAD's budget, so they would have to budget for it. But you're
But
right.
isn't that part of the KDAD's budget? Isn't that where the Problem Gambling and Addiction Fund goes to?
Yeah, and they have a history of sweeping.
Joan, can you go up to the microphone? I think Tony's having a hard time hearing you.
Come on up here, Joan.
Yeah, I think if I remember correctly, that they allocated so much of the funds for gambling and such to go into prevention, and we keep fighting for that to come back.
That's what I'm saying. Could we specifically, if we're doing it with you, why couldn't we do it with you too?
Yeah.
That is a specific thing that we're talking about. And then we could, that's what I want to do, tie it into the sports betting. We haven't even talked about that. Where is that money going to go? Is that going to come online? Is that something that's going to happen this time? Those are the type of specific things that I would like to talk about, because to me, this seems, I don't know, it just seems so broad. It doesn't seem specific. When I go up and talk to a legislator, I want to say, hey, I want to talk about this bill. I want to talk about why this money's getting swept out. It's very specific. When I say, hey, I want a behavioral health hospital, well, yeah, that's all great, but how are we actually going to get it done? How are we going to be able to, do you see what I'm saying? This is, to me, this is too broad for me. I want something specific, something nailed down to say, how can we change what's already there back to what it was before the money was swept out?
But to answer your question a little bit, a year ago, there was an RFP out on the street for a regional mental health facility. We need to resurrect that RFP. So there are some specific things that are out there. We just need to resurrect it.
That I would like, if that's what we're gonna push for, to me it just makes more sense when I'm trying to get something accomplished. I want to know what my end goal is, rather than an overarching broad statement about something that is pie in the sky.
I will say that RFP was not funded, though. There was no money attached to it. So they issued an RFP, but they had no financial backing or any security of money there. That's why it kind of got swept back under.
At that time, we had a governor that was interested in moving forward with it, because Governor Collier put an RFP out on the street for a regional mental health facility. They even come and talked to us. People that were wanting to bid on it came and met with us. So there are some specific things that were happening that have died as a result of us losing Governor Collier.
Yeah. How much was that? What was the bid? What did the RFP come in at?
I don't know if they ever completed it.
Oh, okay.
'Cause
So
than
I
the
think it would,
primary half it.
be an opportunity to ask Governor Kelly where it's at. I don't know that she's against it. I can't speak for her, but I think that it just, a change of guard when you're getting a lot of stuff done when you're first in office. I think I don't see her not wanting to support something like that. So I don't think it's. I think it's a matter of just asking the question where it's at. Can we resurrect it? Is it something that's going to be? We just need to ask the question.
Number three, more money request. Increase funding for state-mandated community corrections adult intensive supervision program. Again, over the last 5 years, we've lost about $500,000. That's critical money that goes to supervising our clients. And I think one of your questions about Johnson County, when you and I had previously talked, it's what's our funding rate? And we get 62% based upon our ADP, which is at 1,567, which is 69% of that. Johnson County gets about 2,400,000, which is 38%. And their funding is their ADP is at 31%. So they're getting a little bit more money with a funding for a lower ADP, and we are getting less funding with a higher ADP. And so our advisory board, our Community Corrections Advisory Board, has put an ask or a request in to KDOC to push money back into the program and restore some programs and some funding and positions so that we can get back to the level that we were at before. They want us to make these success rates. It's hard to do that when you don't have the people to do it. And so that's I'm not alone in this. All the directors are pushing for more funding from the state. And it's just time to put the ask in. We're also doing that in the juvenile side. There's money in the juvenile side. We're still asking for more.
Question for Glenda?
As it relates to the committees working on prison and criminal justice reform in Topeka, if they're looking at alternatives to detention and ways to keep people out of prison, people out of county jails, this type of programming is critical to that.
Mm-hmm.
And we're just asking that the legislators in those committees work with the Department of Corrections to help restore some of this funding that has been reduced over time to put our intensive supervision officers trying to manage a bigger population, a bigger client list, which ultimately results in not as good a product as we could provide the community otherwise.
It's all about funding. So another example, hiring. We're in a critical position of hiring people. We have to be able to pay them. If they can go to court services and get $20 an hour, I just lost another ISO to city probation, and they're paying them a little over $20 an hour, and I'm paying my folks $16 an hour. I'm going to keep losing people. And so asking for more money from KDOC that's another ask that we have as directors across the state to KDOC, is there's been no raise in our funding to allow us to give more funding to our employees. So those are my proposals.
Very good. I don't see any further questions for Glenda.
Thank you.
Thank you. What does you have, Mr. Papoon?
Well, nothing. We just need to, and I'll try to come around and see all of you this week, and we need to start honing this down and decide how many issues we want to have as a county on this platform. And if we need to separate some of those as having a higher priority than some of the other issues, because a lot of these issues that have been presented are all have a lot of merit. We just need to look at it from the standpoint of what's achievable and what are our priorities. And I know it's been mentioned, it's mentioned by Commissioner Cruz, whether we want to have a position statement on some kind of sports gaming or expanded gaming or something, and want to be on record as wanting a piece of that for something. I don't know, but another issue. So
good. I chatted with Mr. Papoon this morning briefly. Last evening I had dinner with a board from KAC, and the table I was eating dinner at, we had Ed Eilert out of Johnson County at the table with me, and we had the guy that represents the attorneys in KAC.
Jay Hall.
Two different times during the evening. First, I asked Ed Eilert what the biggest issue that they've got in Johnson County, and he said their biggest issue was the dark store theory. And I thought that's interesting because it's not in our agenda. And then later on in the evening, I asked the attorney what the biggest issue is that he thinks that the attorneys are going to be discussing for KAC, and he said the dark store theory. Oh. And so when we had the discussion with Mr. Papoon this morning, I don't know that we need to add it, especially if we've got that many people that are pushing the dark store theory. If it ends up coming up to the legislature and something starts working, then we probably need to address it. But I don't know if it needs to be in our agenda or not. So I wanted to bring it up to everybody this morning, let you know that it is an issue that is going to come up, and we probably ought to be prepared to support them in their concerns about the dark store theory.
I guess I'm going to need to be briefed on that exactly. I know a little bit about it, but I need to know more information.
The Wall Street Journal did a really good story on that.
Did they? Cool. We can get that out to all the commissioners. The other
Johnson
thing,
County won't like it.
They won't like it. That's what the Wall Street Journal said.
Right.
Well, as far as how it relates to Sedgwick County, though, I mean, like, I'd like to know how it impacts us. Yeah.
Just as general information, the other thing that Ed Eilert told me yesterday is that they hired a appraiser. And I said, that's interesting because we haven't hired an appraiser yet, so we'll have to figure out where we're at with that. They evidently hired someone out of Maricopa County, so I don't know if that individual applied for a job here or not, but they have been searching for less time than we have, and they've already got an appraiser.
Is that a question or just a statement?
Well, I think we need an appraiser.
I agree, sir. We're still working on it. You want to
I'm not saying Mark's not doing a great job. We appreciate what Mark's doing, but we need somebody that says appraiser, not interim.
I can give you an update on where we're at. I have interviews set up for next Friday, the 22nd, for appraisers. So I'll bring in our community panel, and I can tell you that one is from the state of Kansas, and then we have one candidate who is from the state of Arkansas. So we'll bring them in and do interviews and hopefully have someone to recommend to you after that time.
Sounds good. All right, what else you have? Oh, we got agenda?
Well, we can, or it's noon hour. I can catch agenda with you through the weekly meetings. I think it'll be all good. It's a pretty light agenda. We'll just take a second to go over. So we'll just do it during your regular meetings.
Okay.
Okay. That's all we had.
That's all you have? Commissioners, you have anything today?
I'd like to know what the status of ICT-1 is.
I asked that this morning. Dr. Gallagher just left.
Okay. Sure.
Down, right?
So the status of ICT-1, we had a meeting last week, which was to try to find out where the partners are on that project. We had a commitment from, so currently it was a 90-day pilot. There was an MOU that was drafted and signed between all the parties that it would last for 90 days. The sheriff, at the end of that 90-day cycle, would not continue at that point, and Sedgwick County Fire District would not continue at that point. Both of them needed to know what the long-term status of that was going to be. We're going to fund this thing and continue it onward or what? Wichita also had a limitation in that they could assign an officer for a short period of time, but by contract, if they are going to assign an officer to that type of special unit, that they have to do interviews and identify a candidate through an interview process. So everybody agreed to 90 days. 90 days arrived, and so it was suspended. Last week's meeting was to determine where the partners are wanting to go forward or wanting to regroup and do something different. In that meeting, there were commitments from ComCare, from EMS, from Wichita Fire Department. All of them want to continue as a pilot. They determined that it would be best to continue as a pilot using the resources that they all have and work to collect a little more data, another 3 months worth of data, so they had a full 6 months worth of data, and then go into each of their respective budget cycles and make presentations at that time as to what their recommendations are and ask for funding through the budget process, both on the city side and the county side.
According to Councilmember Claycomb, they did put it in their budget for next year.
Okay. Apparently the fire chief has not been informed of that because that was her recommendation to continue the pilot and then go into the budget cycle, the 21 budget cycle, and make recommendations and ask for funding at that time.
But since the police chief wasn't in the meeting, do we have any commitment from the police department?
Currently, we're waiting to find out what the police chief wants to do as far as law enforcement on this. So that's where we are right now. Is we need to find out from the chief what the Wichita Police Department's commitment is to moving forward with the pilot, and then trying to move that into a full-time funded operation beyond that 6-month period.
Did we see success with the program in the first 3 months?
Statistically, it appears to have been, there was success in the project. Obviously, there are different opinions, and there's other people who have asked for different statistics. But it shows that it diverted fire, police, and EMS resources. It reduced wait times in hospitals for those patients who had to be taken for involuntary commitments. It provided in-place treatment to a lot of people where this group could go out and rather than taking them to jail or to the hospital or to ComCare, they were able to coordinate with that person's family or with friends, whoever was residing with them, get them settled in place, get a plan in place to help them get into a facility into a treatment tomorrow or something like that. So they could treat in place and not leave them in crisis to where they would continue to call 911. So statistically, they showed successes in those areas for that short period of time. But again, the three partners agreed that they would like to continue this as a pilot, utilizing the resources they have for at least another 6 months, and specifically so they could collect at least 3 more months of data before each one of them goes into budget development for 21, and then they could have better information to ask elected bodies on both sides of the street for the resources they think they need and to provide that additional data to show that this is worthwhile and needs to continue as a permanent.
What three partners are you saying?
EMS Fire, EMS City Fire, and ComCare. The sheriff tentatively may continue to be a partner, but we need to hear from the chief as well. The two of them need to decide on the law enforcement piece.
We have a 11/26, which is 2 weeks from today. We have a 90-day assessment for ICT-1 coming before you with all the statistics. What Rusty's talking about is it's a question of whether we keep this pilot alive, which until we get law enforcement to weigh in, sheriff and police, we don't know the answer to that question. So
what's taken so long? I mean, you know, you have a pilot that's working in our community. It's diverting dollars. I mean, it's saving our taxpayer dollars. What's the problem? Why can't we get people in the same room?
You got to get the police chief to show up at the meeting.
So, you know, I just feel like, I mean, you know, if we're seeing success with a program, I'm just a little disheartened to hear that we're kind of lingering. You know, that's where I'm coming from. I mean, schedule conflicts, I get it, we're all busy, but this is a program that we need to really, I mean, if we're going to put dollars to this for 3 months and we're seeing success.
Yeah, I would just, and Dr. Gallagher just walked in, he may want to weigh in, we're talking about ICT-1, Doc. We had a deal, we had a 90-day MOU, and that time has expired. So now the partners, all of them have to decide whether to continue that. And I don't know whether we need an extension of the MOU or not. But to your point, we have to get all the partners in the room, and we did not have the police chief there last week.
For in the future, when we have something like this, we have 90 days to schedule a meeting. We have 3 months to get something on people's calendars. There's really no excuse as to why we haven't had this already on people's calendars and people in the same room having commitments. I mean, if I have 3 months to plan something that's this important, you better believe I'm going to have it on my calendar. Yeah. So I think in the future, if we have a pilot that's going to go for 3 months, there really should be no excuse that we can't get it on people's calendars.
I agree, Commissioner. And on behalf of the people that scheduled that last week, that meeting was scheduled weeks in advance. But at the same by the same token, when you have partnership with another government entity, we can't force them to come. So we'll continue the discussion. We'll try to get a resolution to the existing MOU, and then we have a total debrief for you in 2 weeks. In our budget side, and I'm a little bit perplexed on why there's a miscommunication between a council person and the fire chief. On our side, we have public safety contingency that we have budgeted in case you guys want to fund this program in fiscal 20. Unless they set up the same kind of arrangement over there, I think Chief Snow would have to go through a budget process to acquire that resource. But so we'll try to get clarity on that too. You want to say anything else about ICT-1? She wanted to know current status as it was today.
Yeah, it's turned off.
Okay.
So I speak to maybe the scheduling issue. The design was to have a decision made at 60 days. That's why we did the 60-day report. People did not feel prepared to make a decision at that.
Tony can't pick you up.
Just to speak briefly to the scheduling point. So we did 3 check-ins, well, really 2 check-ins and then a closing. So the idea was to have a check-in at 30 days to make sure that we were on track, to have one at 60 days to guide a decision to decide whether to continue or not, and then 90 days would be the full data set for the pilot. The idea was that at 60 days we would make the decision, is this a go or no go? People didn't make that decision. We didn't have the commitment to staff the team out. So the remainder of the 90 days closed, the program stopped, and then people went back and looked at the data, which frankly was not any different than the 60-day take-home message, but now the program's turned off while we're waiting for commitments. I share your wish that we had had those decisions at the 60-day mark, and we could have rolled right into day 91.
Dr. Gallagher, how many entities are there? Is there 6 departments?
Who's contributing resources? I believe that's correct. So it's myself in EMS, the county fire district number 1, and city fire. We're all contributing to the medical component. Right. Chief Williams has determined that he can't justify continuing forward on it, so it will be between myself and the city fire department to staff a paramedic. ComCare stepped up for the full FTE, and then the law enforcement component was shared between the sheriff's office and city police. So we currently have commitments for both the medical component and the social worker component. I don't have a law enforcement officer.
Okay. So if we had a commitment to continue the pilot, to ramp it back up and continue it, we would need agreement from these 3 departments that are questioning if they want to
right now
continue.
It's down to just our law enforcement partners.
Okay. And if they would say, yeah, we'll continue on in this pilot while we work on a budget, we could ramp it back up
quickly. I probably couldn't turn it on same day, but once we could get the people
within
brought back
weeks or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, we've got people trained who are already assigned to it. Yep.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Commissioners, anything else? Any other? I don't see any electeds in here. Any staff? Very good. We'll go back to work. Thank you all.